The crystal towers of Zarian Prime sparkled in the light of three suns. Jake Morrison stood at the window of his hotel room, watching alien ships land at the spaceport below. Today was the start of the biggest trade meeting in the galaxy. As Earth's ambassador, Jake knew how important this was for humanity. Lisa Carter knocked on his door. She was his aide and had been working with him for 3 years. "The shuttle is ready, Ambassador," she said. "Commander Bennett is all ready, waiting downstairs." Jake picked up his briefcase and followed Lisa to the elevator. Paul Bennett was standing in the lobby wearing his dress uniform. He was the military advisor for their team, but Jake hoped they would not need his skills today. This was supposed to be about trade, not war. The ride to the Senate building took 20 minutes. Jake looked out at the strange city around them. The buildings were made of some kind of living crystal that grew into different shapes. Alien beings walked the streets, some floating, some crawling, some walking on more legs than Jake could count. "First time seeing so many species together," Lisa said, looking out her window. "Makes you realize how big the galaxy really is," Paul added. The Senate building was huge. It looked like a giant crystal flower with petals made of different colored glass. Each petal was a meeting room for different groups. The main chamber was in the center, where all the important decisions were made. Jake and his team walked through the security checks. The alien guards scanned them with blue light and checked their identification cards. Everything seemed normal. Other delegations were arriving too. Jake recognized some of them from the pictures in his briefing files. The Zephyrians looked like tall, thin birds with silver feathers. They moved in a way that seemed like they were dancing. Their leader was Ambassador Kethful, who had been doing this job for longer than Jake had been alive. The Centaurians were more like large cats, but they walked on 2 legs and wore robes covered in strange symbols. Their fur changed colors as they moved, which Jake knew meant they were talking to each other in their own special way. The Altarians looked almost human, except their skin was blue, and they had 4 arms. They wore simple white clothes and always seemed very serious about everything. Jake's team took their seats in the human section. The chamber was arranged in a circle, with each species having their own area. In the center was a raised platform, where speakers would stand. Above everything was a huge crystal that would translate what everyone said into a language that all species could understand. The meeting started when Elder Counselor Vextai of the Altarians stood up. He was very old and respected by everyone in the galaxy. He spoke in his own language, and the crystal above them glowed. Then Jake heard the translation in English. "Welcome, friends, from across the stars. Today we gather to discuss the trade, routes that connect our worlds and bring prosperity to all our peoples." It sounded normal to Jake. Other species around the room seemed to be listening carefully. Then Ambassador Kethevol of the Zephyrians stood up to give his response. Kethevol spoke in a musical voice that rose and fell like a song. The crystal glowed again, and Jake heard the translation. "We are grateful for this opportunity to work together. The Zephyrian people have always believed in fair trade and mutual respect. We hope that our discussions will lead to agreements that benefit everyone." Jake thought it sounded like a good start. But then something strange happened. The Centaurian delegation suddenly stood up. Their leader, Trademaster Velnoth, made angry sounds that Jake could not understand. The crystal translated, "We will not listen to these insults any longer. The Centaurian Trade Union is leaving this meeting." Jake was confused. What insults? He had not heard any insults in what Kethevol said. But the Centaurians were already walking toward the exit. Then the Altarian delegation stood up too. Vextai spoke quickly in his language. The translation came through. "If the Zephyrians think they can threaten us, they are wrong. The Altarian hegemony does not bow to anyone." Now Jake was really confused. Threaten? What threat? He looked at Lisa and Paul, and they looked just as confused as he felt. Kethvol seemed shocked. He spoke again, and the translation said, "Please, there has been some mistake. We meant no offense to anyone." But it was too late. 3 more delegations were standing up and making angry sounds. The crystal was translating all kinds of accusations. The Drakmor were talking about honor and revenge. The Nexus Collective was buzzing about broken promises. The Vorthon were saying something about territorial violations. Within 10 minutes, half the delegations had walked out of the meeting. The other half were shouting at each other. Security guards were moving into position around the room. Jake stood up. He had to do something before this turned into a fight. "Wait," he called out, but his voice was lost in all the noise. Paul grabbed his arm. "Ambassador, we should leave too. This is getting dangerous." But Jake had noticed something important. All the humans in the room looked confused, just like his team. They were the only ones who did not seem to understand what had made everyone so angry. Jake walked to the center platform. He activated the speaking system and his voice filled the chamber. "May I ask a question?" The room became quiet. Everyone looked at him. "I am Ambassador Morrison from Earth. I heard everything that was said here today through the translation system. But I did not hear any insults or threats or promises being broken. So I want to ask each delegation a simple question." Jake looked around the room at all the different alien faces watching him. "What exactly did you hear?" The silence that followed was the beginning of everything that would change the galaxy forever. Dr. Amy Rodriguez stepped off the transport ship and breathed the strange air of Xerion Prime. She had traveled for 3 days to get here after receiving Jake Morrison's emergency message. As Earth's best expert on alien languages, she knew this had to be serious. Greg Walsh was waiting for her at the landing pad. He was a technician who specialized in translation equipment. "Dr. Rodriguez, thank you for coming so fast," he said, picking up her equipment cases. "The situation is getting worse every hour." They rode to the Senate building in silence. Amy could see alien warships in the sky above the city. Some were leaving, but others were arriving. Greg told her that 5 different species had called their military fleets after the meeting disaster. "How bad is it really?" Amy asked. 3 border skirmishes started yesterday, Greg said. The Centaurians and Zephyrians are shooting at each other near the Proxima trade route. The Altarians have closed their space to everyone, and the Drakmor are mobilizing their war fleets. Amy felt sick. All of this because of translation problems. They entered the Senate building through a side door. Jake Morrison was waiting for them in a small meeting room. He looked like he had not slept in days. Lisa Carter and Paul Bennett were there too, along with several alien officials who had stayed to help figure out what went wrong. "Amy, thank God you're here," Jake said. "We need to understand what happened before this turns into a real war." Elder Counselor Vextai was sitting at the table. He was one of the few alien leaders who had not left the planet yet. "Dr. Rodriguez, we have heard of your work with languages. Perhaps you can explain why our translation systems have failed us." Amy sat down and opened her computer. "First, I need to understand exactly what each species heard during the meeting. Can you tell me what Ambassador Kethavol's words sounded like to you?" Vextai thought for a moment. The Zephyrian spoke of crushing weakness and claiming dominance over trade routes. He said the Altarian people were beneath his notice and that we should submit to Zephyrian control. Amy typed quickly. "And what did the human translation system tell Ambassador Morrison?" Jake read from his notes. "We heard him say that the Zephyrian people believed in fair trade and mutual respect, and he hoped for agreements that would benefit everyone." Amy looked at Greg. "We need to check the translation matrices immediately." They moved to the technical room where the main translation computer was kept. The machine was huge, with crystals and wires connecting different processing units. Greg showed Amy how it worked. "Each species has their own input module," he explained. "The Zephyrians speak through harmonic frequencies. The Centaurians use scent markers along with their vocal sounds. The Altarians use temporal verb structures that show social rank. All of this gets processed through the central matrix and then output in each species' communication method." Amy studied the readouts on her computer. What she found made her heart sink. "Greg, look at these error logs. The system has been making small mistakes for years. Each mistake builds on the previous ones, creating bigger and bigger problems." "What kind of mistakes?" Jake asked. Amy pointed to her screen. "The Zephyrians communicate emotion through musical tones. When Kethavol spoke about fair trade, he used harmonics that meant humble cooperation in his language. But the system translated those harmonics as dominance assertion for species that interpret music differently. She pulled up another file. The Centaurians use scent to modify meaning. They smell chemical markers that completely change what words mean. But the translation system can't process scents, so it just ignores them. A Centaurian saying, "I respect you without the right scent markers" actually means "I challenge you" to other Centaurians. Greg was looking at more data. "Amy, this is worse than we thought. Look at the Vorthan language module." Amy checked the Vorthan files. The Vorthan Empire used verb tenses that showed how important the speaker thought they were compared to the listener. When the system translated Vorthan words into other languages, it lost all of this social ranking information. So when a Vorthan commander says, "Please consider our proposal," using high-status verb forms, other species hear it as a demand or threat. Amy said. Captain Helen Ross entered the room. She commanded the Earthship Meridian, which was in orbit above the planet. "Dr. Rodriguez, we just received word that the Drakmor fleet is moving toward Centaurian space. They think the Centaurians insulted their honor during the meeting." Amy worked faster on her computer. "Captain, I need you to contact all the human ships in this system. Tell them to start recording everything the alien ships are saying to each other. We need examples of how badly the translations are failing. Over." The next few hours, the evidence piled up. Human ships recorded dozens of conversations between alien fleets. When Amy ran them through the translation system, she found the same problems everywhere. A Zephyrian captain trying to avoid conflict sounded like he was issuing battle challenges to Drakmor ships. Centaurian trade officials asking for peaceful negotiations came across as making territorial demands to the Altarians. Vorthan diplomatic messages were translated as insults to everyone who received them. "This explains everything," Amy told the group. "Species have been misunderstanding each other for decades. Every diplomatic meeting, every trade negotiation, every peace treaty has been built on miscommunication." Jake looked at the data she had collected. "How is it possible that no one noticed this before?" "Because each species thought the others were just being difficult or rude," Amy said. When a Zephyrian seemed to be making threats, the Centaurians assumed that was normal Zephyrian behavior. When Centaurians appeared to be making demands, everyone else thought that was just how Centaurians acted. Elder Counselor Vextai had been listening quietly. "Dr. Rodriguez, if this is true, then many of our conflicts may have been caused by these translation errors. Wars may have been fought over misunderstood words." Amy nodded sadly. "I'm afraid that's exactly what happened." Paul Bennett looked up from his military reports. "We have a bigger problem. 3 more species just called their fleets. If we don't fix this soon, we're going to have a full galactic war." Greg was still working on the translation computer. "Amy, I've been trying to fix the matrices, but it's not working. The errors are too deep in the system. We would need months to reprogram everything." Amy stared at the computer, thinking hard. Then an idea came to her. What if we don't try to fix the computer? What if we use something else? "Like what?" Jake asked. Amy looked around the room at all the humans and aliens, working together. "Like us. Humans. We've been learning alien languages the old way, without the computer. We understand the real meanings because we learned them directly." She turned to Elder Counselor Vextai. "When you spoke just now, I understood exactly what you meant because I learned Altarian language from Altarian teachers. I know about your verb tenses and social rankings. When Greg speaks Centaurian, he knows about scent markers because he studied with Centaurian linguists." Jake began to understand what she was suggesting. "You mean humans could translate for everyone else?" "Not just translate," Amy said. "We could be the bridge between species. We could make sure everyone understands what everyone else really means." Captain Ross was already on her communicator. "This could work. We have human linguists on ships throughout the galaxy, people who learned alien languages properly." Elder Counselor Vextai stood up slowly. "You are suggesting that humans become the voice of the galaxy?" Amy looked at him steadily. "I'm suggesting that humans help the galaxy find its voice. All of its voices." Outside the window, more alien warships appeared in the sky. Time was running out. Jake Morrison stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Senate. Only half the original delegations had returned, and those who came brought their military advisors. The crystal translation system had been turned off after Amy Rodriguez proved it was causing the problems. "Honored delegates," Jake began, speaking slowly so the few remaining translation devices could keep up. "We have discovered why our peoples have been fighting. The universal translator has been changing our words for years. What you hear is not what we mean to say." Trademaster Velnoth of the Centaurians made a series of clicking sounds. His aide translated, "The human speaks of our sacred translation crystal as if it were broken. This is impossible. The crystal has served the galaxy for 300 years." Elder Counselor Vextai replied in his own language. Another aide translated, "Yet the evidence is clear. Dr. Rodriguez has shown us recordings of our own words. What we said and what others heard were completely different." Amy Rodriguez stood up next to Jake. "I propose a solution. Humans will serve as communication bridges for all Senate meetings. We have people who learned your languages properly. Without the computer, we can make sure everyone understands what everyone else really means." A low buzzing sound came from the Nexus Collective section. Hive Node Prime Zarthek spoke through multiple voices at once. "The young species offers to become the mouth of the galaxy. Why should we trust creatures who have been among the stars for less than 100 years? Lieutenant Colonel Steve Hayes entered the chamber with Karen Murphy, his communications officer. They had been working with Amy to prepare a demonstration. Steve activated a portable translation unit he had built. "We asked for the chance to prove ourselves," Steve said. "Let us show you how human translation works." Karen stepped forward and spoke to Ambassador Kethavol in perfect Zephyrian musical tones. Her voice rose and fell in harmonics that made the crystal walls of the chamber vibrate softly. When she finished, she turned to the Centaurians and repeated the same message, but this time she included the chemical scent markers that gave the words their proper meaning. Then she spoke to the Altarians using the correct verb forms that showed respect for their social ranking. Finally, she addressed the Vorten delegation with temporal structures that indicated she saw them as equals worthy of consideration. The effect was immediate. All four species began talking among themselves in excited voices. Elder Counselor Vextai stood up with all four of his arms raised in surprise. "The human spoke our true language," he said. "Not just our words, but our meaning. She showed proper respect for our customs." Ambassador Kethavol sang a brief melody and then spoke. "For the first time in years, I heard a non-Zephyrian speak with correct emotional harmony. The human understood, not just what to say, but how to feel the words." Trademaster Velnoth made approving clicking sounds. "The scent markers were perfect. She spoke as one of our own trade family. Even the Vorthen delegate seemed impressed. The temporal structures showed proper understanding of diplomatic equality. This is how true communication should work." Amy Rodriguez stepped forward. "This is just the beginning. We have human linguists throughout the galaxy who can do the same thing. We can create a network of translators who understand not just words, but meaning." Jake Morrison pulled out a datapad with his proposal. "We call it the Human Bridge Protocol. For every important Senate meeting, humans will provide real translation services. Not computer translation, but human translation that preserves the true meaning of what each species wants to say." General Thrognak of the Drakmor Empire had been silent until now. He was a massive warrior with scars covering his arms and face. When he spoke, his voice was like thunder. "The Drakmor do not trust easy words. We have heard promises before. How do we know the humans will not change our words to serve their own purposes?" This was the question Jake had been expecting. "General, we propose a test. Give us your most difficult diplomatic challenge. Let us prove that we can help your people communicate with others without losing the strength and honor of your words." Thrognak thought for a long moment. Then he spoke in the Drakmor war language, using phrases that had started conflicts in the past. Karen Murphy listened carefully and then turned to address the other delegations. "General Thrognak says that the Drakmor people value strength and direct action," she translated. "He wants other species to know that when the Drakmor make a promise, they will keep it even if it costs them greatly. He asks that others show the same commitment to their words. He is not threatening anyone. He is asking for the kind of respect that comes from taking agreements seriously. The chamber was quiet. Then Elder Counselor Vextai spoke. In 300 years of Senate meetings, no one has ever explained Drakmor words in a way that showed their honor rather than their aggression. General Thrognak nodded slowly. The human understood. She heard the strength in our words, but also the respect we offer to those who prove themselves worthy. Hive Node Prime Zarthek buzzed again, but this time the sound was different. The Nexus Collective sees the value in this proposal. But we must know, what do the humans gain from becoming the voice of others? What do they want in return? Jake. Morrison had prepared for this question too. We want the galaxy to stop fighting over misunderstood words. We want trade routes to stay open and peaceful. We want the chance to learn from all of you, and to help you learn from each other. If the galaxy prospers, humanity prospers with it. Steve Hayes added, we also want to prevent wars that start because of translation mistakes. Human ships travel the same space routes as everyone else. When species fight over miscommunication, we all suffer. Amy Rodriguez stood up again. But most importantly, we want to preserve the unique voice of each species. The universal translator was making everyone sound the same. Our way lets you keep the music in Zephyrian speech, the scent meaning in Centaurian words, the honor in Drakmor promises, and the wisdom in Altarian diplomacy. Trademaster Velnoth made a series of rapid clicks and scent releases. Karen Murphy translated. He says that for the first time in years, he feels like other species might actually understand what the Centaurians are trying to accomplish in trade negotiations. Elder Counselor Vextai conferred with his delegation for several minutes. Then he stood up and addressed the chamber. The Altarian hegemony supports this proposal. We agree to a trial period of 6 months. If the Human Bridge Protocol works, as promised, we will support making it permanent. One by one, the other delegations agreed to the trial. Even General Thrognak gave his approval, though he insisted on testing the humans with increasingly difficult diplomatic scenarios. As the session ended, Jake Morrison felt both relief and responsibility. Humanity had just been given the most important job in the galaxy, making sure that everyone could understand everyone else. But he also knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when they had to prevent an actual war, not just a diplomatic argument. Outside the chamber, Windows, the alien warships were still waiting in orbit, ready to fight or flee depending on what happened next. 3 weeks into the trial period, Jake Morrison's team faced their biggest challenge yet. The Nexus Collective had requested a special session to test the human translators with the most complex diplomatic scenarios in galactic history. Hive Node Prime Zarthek arrived with a delegation of 12 different subminds, each representing a different aspect of their collective consciousness. Amy Rodriguez had been studying Nexus communication for days, but she knew this would push her skills to the limit. The Nexus speaks in layers, she explained to Jake and the team. Each submind adds its own meaning to the words. When they all speak together, it creates ideas that no single voice could express alone. Dr. Peter Collins had joined their team as a specialist in multi-layered communication. He was nervous but excited about the challenge. I've been working with Maria Santos on the cultural analysis. The Nexus isn't just testing our translation skills. They're testing whether we understand their entire way of thinking. The session began with what seemed like a simple territorial dispute. The Drakmor Empire and the Centaurian Trade Union had conflicting claims over mining rights in the Kepler Nebula. But Hive Node Prime Zarthek had chosen this case specifically because previous attempts to resolve it had failed for over 50 years. General Thrognak spoke first, using formal Drakmor war speech. The Kepler Nebula has been Drakmor territory since our ancestors first traveled the stars. We claimed it with blood and honor. No other species may take what is ours by right of conquest. Before Jake could assign a translator, 3 different Nexus subminds began speaking at once. Their words overlapped and intertwined in ways that made Amy's head hurt just listening. Peter Collins stepped forward. He had been practicing this for weeks. General Thrognak, he said, The Nexus wants you to know that they understand the honor behind your claim. Your ancestors fought for that territory when it was dangerous and unknown. The Nexus respects courage and sacrifice. Then Peter turned to the Centaurian delegation. Trade Master Velnoth, the Nexus also understands your position. Your people have been mining the nebula peacefully for 30 years. You have built stations and employed workers from many species. The Nexus values productive cooperation. Trade Master Velnoth made surprised clicking sounds. Through scent markers, he was asking how the Nexus could understand both sides of an impossible conflict. Maria Santos took over the translation. She had learned to read Centaurian scent speech better than any other human. The Nexus suggests that both honor and productivity can exist together, she said, including the proper chemical markers to show respect for Centaurian trade customs. The Nexus subminds spoke again, this time in a pattern that created new meanings from the combination of their voices. Amy Rodriguez listened carefully and then addressed both delegations. The Nexus proposes a solution that honors both your traditions, she said. General Thrognak, your people claimed the nebula first. The Nexus suggests that the Centaurians should pay tribute to the Drakmor Empire for the right to mine there. Not as conquest, but as recognition of your prior claim. She turned to the Centaurians. Trademaster Velnoth, this tribute could take the form of shared technology and training for Drakmor miners. Your people would teach Drakmor workers how to extract resources safely and efficiently. Both species would benefit from the knowledge exchange. General Thrognak considered this carefully. The Nexus shows wisdom. This solution gives honor to Drakmor claims while allowing Centaurian work to continue. It is not surrender by either side. Trademaster Velnoth released approval. Sense. This creates a partnership instead of a conflict. Both our peoples gain more than either could alone. But Hive Node Prime Zarthek was not finished testing the humans. The next case involved a three-way trade dispute between the Altarians, Zephyrians, and Vorthon Empire. This conflict had no clear solution because each species needed something that another species controlled, but traditional negotiations had failed because of communication barriers. The Altarians needed rare crystals that only grew on Zephyrian worlds. The Zephyrians needed advanced technology that only the Vorthon possessed. The Vorthon wanted access to Altarian diplomatic networks that could help them expand their territory. Elder Counselor Vextai explained the Altarian position using complex temporal verb structures that showed how long his people had been seeking these crystals and how important they were for Altarian medicine. Ambassador Kethful sang the Zephyrian response in harmonics that expressed both desire for Vorthon technology and sadness about giving up their sacred crystals. The Vorthon delegate spoke in time-shifted language that made it clear they saw territorial expansion as a natural right, but also showed respect for diplomatic traditions. Jake Morrison realized that no direct trade could satisfy all three species because they were asking for things that were too valuable to give up easily. But the human translators had heard something else in the words. Each species was willing to give something if they could receive something of equal value in return. Amy Rodriguez coordinated with her team and then addressed all three delegations. Each of your peoples values different things, she said. The Altarians value healing and long life. The Zephyrians value art and spiritual harmony. The Vorthon value growth and expansion. She paused to let the translation devices catch up. What if instead of trading objects, you trade knowledge and experiences? The Altarians could teach Zephyrian healers how to use the crystals for medical purposes, making them more valuable. The Zephyrians could share their artistic techniques with Vorthon architects, helping them build more beautiful colonies. The Vorthon could train Altarian diplomats in expansion strategies, helping them spread their influence peacefully. Peter Collins added, this way, each species gives knowledge but keeps their physical resources. The Zephyrians keep their crystals, but learn to use them for healing. The Vorthon keep their technology but learn to make it more beautiful. The Altarians keep their diplomatic networks but learn to make them more effective. The three delegations spent an hour discussing this proposal among themselves. When they returned, all three had agreed to the knowledge exchange plan. But Hive Node, Prime Zarthek had one final test, the most difficult case of all. The ancient blood feud between the Altarians and the Drakmor Empire. For over 200 years, these two species had maintained a state of Cold War. The conflict had started with a territorial dispute, but generations of mistranslation and misunderstanding had turned it into a cultural hatred that seemed impossible to resolve. General Thrognak spoke in ancient Drakmor battle language. The Altarians dishonored our ancestors and stole our rightful territory. They used words of peace to hide acts of war. Drakmor honor demands that this debt be paid in blood. Elder Counselor Vextai responded in formal Altarian, using verb tenses that reached back through centuries of tradition. The Drakmor speak of honor while practicing barbarism. They mistake aggression for strength and violence for justice. The Altarian people cannot make peace with those who value destruction above creation. For a moment, Jake thought this was impossible. How could humans translate a conflict this deep and old? But Amy Rodriguez stepped forward with confidence. She spoke first to General Thrognak in Drakmor, then to Elder Counselor Vextai in Altarian. What she said to each of them privately, only they could hear. When she finished, both leaders sat in silence for a long time. Finally, General Thrognak spoke. The human translator has shown me that Altarian words of peace were sincere, not deceptive. Their ancestors truly believed they were preventing war, not causing it. Elder Counselor Vextai replied, I have learned that Drakmor acts of aggression came from genuine pain, not evil intent. Their ancestors truly believed they were defending their honor, not seeking conquest. The chamber was completely quiet. Even the Nexus submines stopped their constant buzzing. Amy Rodriguez addressed the entire assembly. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is admitting that you have been fighting the wrong enemy. Sometimes the greatest wisdom is realizing that your enemy was fighting the wrong war. Hive Node Prime Zarthek spoke in all 12 voices at once, creating a harmony that filled the chamber. The humans have passed every test. They do not just translate words, they translate hearts and minds and souls. The Nexus Collective supports making the Human Bridge Protocol permanent. As the session ended, Jake Morrison realized that humanity had just proven something important about themselves. They were not just good at learning languages. They were good at understanding what people really meant when they spoke from their deepest fears and hopes. The age of miscommunication was ending. The age of true understanding was about to begin. 6 months after the first translation crisis, Jake Morrison stood before the largest gathering in galactic history. Every member species of the Senate had sent their highest representatives to vote on making the Human Bridge Protocol permanent. The chamber had been expanded twice to fit all the delegations. Amy Rodriguez sat at the new director's desk, a position created specifically for her as Chief Linguistic Coordinator. The desk was built with communication panels for every known alien language, allowing her to coordinate with human translators throughout the galaxy in real time. The results spoke for themselves. In 6 months, the Human Bridge Protocol had prevented 12 potential wars, resolved 43 trade disputes, and established 30 new diplomatic partnerships between species that had never successfully communicated before. Elder Counselor Vextai called the session to order. His voice carried an authority that came from decades of experience and the respect of every species in the galaxy. Today we vote not just on a communication system, but on the future of galactic civilization itself. Trademaster Velnoth was the first to speak in favor of the proposal. Through scent markers and careful clicking, he explained how Centaurian trade had improved by 300% since humans began translating their negotiations. For the first time in decades, other species understand that our proposals are offers of partnership, not demands for submission. Ambassador Kethavol sang his support in harmonics that made the crystal walls vibrate with joy. The humans have given us back our voice. When I speak of Zephyrian art and beauty, others finally hear the love in our words instead of arrogance or weakness. General Thrognak stood with his full military honor guard. The Drakmor Empire supports the humans. They have shown us that strength can be expressed through understanding as well as force. They translate our honor without making us sound like barbarians who think only of war. But not everyone was convinced. High Admiral Krentek of the Outer Rim Coalition had traveled from the edge of known space to voice his concerns. What happens when the humans decide they no longer want this responsibility? What happens if they use their position to favor some species over others? We are making ourselves dependent on creatures we barely know. Jake Morrison had expected this question. He stood and activated the translation system that now bore his name. High Admiral Krentek raises important concerns. Let me address them directly. He paused to ensure his words would be translated properly to all species present. First, humanity accepts this responsibility permanently. We are not taking this job temporarily. We are making it part of who we are as a species. We will train our children to be bridges between your peoples. We will make this our contribution to galactic civilization. Amy Rodriguez stood beside him. Second, we have created safeguards against favoritism. Every human translator takes an oath of neutrality. We record all our translations so other species can verify our accuracy. We work in teams so no single human controls any important communication. Captain Helen Ross entered the chamber with a datapad full of statistics. Third, our ships monitor communication across the galaxy. We can prove that human translation has made space safer for everyone. Trade route attacks are down 60% because species are not misunderstanding each other's intentions. Dr. Peter Collins and Maria Santos had prepared a presentation showing the results of their work. We have also discovered something remarkable, Peter said. Learning to translate for other species has made humans better at understanding each other. Our own conflicts have decreased as we learn to really listen to what people mean when they speak. Hive Node Prime Zarthek buzzed in all 12 voices, creating a complex harmony that expressed multiple thoughts at once. Amy Rodriguez listened carefully and then translated. The Nexus Collective has observed humanity for 6 months. They conclude that humans have a unique gift for understanding multiple perspectives simultaneously. This makes them natural mediators not just for language but for ideas and cultures. The vote began with the most senior species. The Altarian Hegemony voted yes. The Zephyrian Harmony voted yes. The Centaurian Trade Union voted yes. The Drakmor Empire voted yes. Species after species cast their votes in favor of the proposal. Even High Admiral Krentek ultimately voted yes, though he insisted on adding safeguards to prevent humans from abusing their position. When the final vote was counted, the result was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, every member species had agreed on something important. Elder Counselor Vextai made the announcement official. The Human Bridge Protocol is hereby adopted as permanent law of the Galactic Senate. Furthermore, humanity is granted the unique privilege of speaking without translation filters in all Senate proceedings. The irony was not lost on anyone in the chamber. The youngest species in the galaxy, the newest members of galactic civilization, had become its most essential diplomatic tool. Jake Morrison was formally appointed as the first director of interspecies communication, a position that would be held by humans in perpetuity. Amy Rodriguez became chief linguistic coordinator, in charge of training the next generation of human translators. But the real celebration came when Captain Ross announced the opening of the Galactic Communication Academy on Earth. Young humans would study alongside alien students, learning not just languages but the deeper art of understanding what beings really meant when they spoke from their hearts. The Academy's first class included students from every major species. Zephyrian younglings learned to sing with human children. Centaurian cubs practiced scent speech with human teenagers. Altarian youth studied diplomatic protocol alongside human university students. As the session ended, Jake Morrison found himself thinking about humanity's journey to the stars. They had dreamed of finding other intelligent life, of learning from advanced civilizations, of taking their place among the galactic community. They had never imagined that their greatest contribution would not be their technology or their military strength or their scientific knowledge. Instead, it was their ability to listen, to understand, and to help others find their voice. The final moment of the session came when all the species representatives gathered for a group declaration. This had never been attempted before because, No translation system could handle so many different communication methods at once. But with human translators coordinating the effort, every species spoke at the same time in their own language. The humans wove all the different voices together into a single message that every being in the galaxy could understand. The declaration was simple. We are different, but we are one. We speak in many voices, but we share one future among the stars. As the delegates departed for their homeworlds, Jake Morrison remained in the empty chamber. Amy Rodriguez joined him, along with the rest of their team. "Do you think we can really do this?" Lisa Carter asked. "Can we really be the voice of the galaxy?" Jake looked out at the ships departing in the sky above. Human ships flew alongside alien vessels, carrying translators to every corner of known space. "We're not the voice of the galaxy," he said. "We're the bridge that lets the galaxy find its own voice. All of its voices. Together." The age of isolation was over. The age of understanding had begun, and humanity had found its purpose among the stars not as conquerors or explorers, but as the species that helped everyone else truly hear each other for the first time. In the end, the humans were granted the right to speak freely in Senate councils, not because they demanded it, but because everyone else realized that when humans spoke, they spoke for all of them.